you saw last week's video, you would have seen me recording it in a quiet little place in my room when I was on holiday. I think in hindsight, I may, obviously being on holiday, I may have been a bit ambitious with thinking I was going to do much coding. I had the intention there, said I would do a couple hours in the morning when I first wake up and then sort of enjoy the rest of my day. But lions, having a few drinks the night before, and then people being like, oh, do you want to go out for coffee? Do you want to, sit by the pool and do nothing? All got a bit too tempting. Not so much like progress to update in terms of that front, but the way I view this video is I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up as the last video. Today is just going to be a video that's going a bit more deeper into what specifically I've been doing, some lessons learned already, and really focusing more on the CSS aspect of things. So even though I spoke a bit about this last week, I thought it'd just be good to give a quick overview of what I learned when learning HTML. I wanted to follow a proper YouTube tutorial. So I found this guy, I can't remember what his name is, it was recommended by Andrew Smith, who I mentioned before. This was a 2-hour video that covered what I think anyway is everything you need to know about HTML to get you started. So that was the configuration, so setting up the head with the meta char set and UTF and all that kind of stuff. Then going into your headings, your paragraphs, your divs, your spans, the ordered lists, the unordered lists, obviously links and images, super important. And then even went into things like sections, articles, and I think lastly was tables. So I built my own website. Obviously it was just bare bones. It was just a bunch of text on a page. I probably went a bit too far down this. I followed the 2-hour video, built I used to be a personal trainer, so it's easy, people have recommended doing a project where you have a passion and interest. So even though I'm not personal training anymore, I have a lot of knowledge and sort of ideas about building a personal training website. So I thought it'd be a perfect project to use this for. Like I said, I probably spent a bit too long time on this in hindsight, and built a homepage, built a training program page, built a recipes page, and spent I'd say a good month building out all these sort of really basic HTML pages. But still good practice nonetheless. I think at this stage as well, HTML gave me a bit of a false sense of security because it was, it was very easy. And it's very 1 + 1 = 2. And what I mean by that is you put your HTML on the page. So say it's like a header and it pops up. Then you put your paragraph and it pops up. Then you put your link, which is a little bit more complicated, just with the source and the equals and all that stuff, but then it pops up. I was like, this is great. I feel like I'm actually coding now. I'm building a website, and thought that would continue into CSS. And like I spoke about last week, got into CSS and then quickly realized, whoa, this is a whole another level of complicated than what I had prepared myself for. Where I started with CSS, I know Kevin Powell is the main CSS guy, and I'd heard of him before. So I found one of his playlists. It was the Getting into CSS playlist. I think it was HTML and CSS actually. And I followed that through. That was really good for getting to grips with the basics, like the syntax, talking about specificity, talking about the different class IDs, selectors, all that kind of stuff. So the fundamentals, I guess I would say, that was really helpful for, and then just applying some really basic styles like font and text and color and background color and size, and mention a little bit about the units. It's still not something that I know kind of how it works, but I don't know, I still don't really know the difference between a rem and an M. I use them all the time. Well, I use rem all the time, but it was good for getting to the grips of the sort of bare fundamentals of CSS. Then got onto the section, which was floats and columns. And in fairness, he had put a more recent video that was 2 years old saying, you can carry on with this playlist if you want, but these methods are now a bit updated because of Flexbox and Grid. So I tried to jump to the next section, but personally I felt like it missed a lot of context. I just jumped into Flexbox and I didn't really know what it was or what I was doing, and I found that quite overwhelming. So then I found another video, a guy called Dave Gray. This was an 11-hour video. I was making my way very slowly through this 11-hour tutorial. And a big lesson at this point was like, I'm not actually learning how to apply this. I'm just copying these examples which wouldn't be applicable to any real website. And that was becoming quite like frustrating and demotivating. I felt like when you buy like a new device and you've got the instruction manual, and the instruction manual's like this thick with tiny text in it. I felt like I was almost reading the entire instruction manual, even though in terms of what I actually needed probably would be a fraction of that. And because it was going really deep and really technical into like every part of CSS really. And the goal for me was always to learn enough CSS to move on to JavaScript. So that became another learning curve, but also another frustration within this CSS learning sort of journey. This is where I first experienced tutorial hell, and where I kept jumping from video to video, and in essence I didn't actually know what I needed to learn. That was the big question. So I'd seen media queries, and then I knew obviously flexbox and grid, but I was like, where do I get started with that? And I sort of fell off the wagon a little bit at this stage, because not knowing what to focus on and what to do became very frustrating. This is where the holiday was quite good, because in the run up to the holiday I'd been feeling quite demotivated and not feeling like I was making any progress, or more importantly, not feeling like I knew how to make progress. So that kind of sparked an idea. Whilst I was sitting there on the sun lounger, I thought, well, why not just watch some YouTube videos about the best methods for learning how to code, not just learning how to code itself. One video that popped up was this podcast about this guy, I think Scott Young was his name, and he wrote a book, Ultra Learning, and this was a guy that learned the whole MIT syllabus, passed the exams as a 4-year degree at one of the world's most prestigious unis, and he managed to do it self-taught and passed in a year. So I thought that was really interesting. I downloaded this book, and the first chapter, I mean, that's as far as I've got, but it was all about doing research to map your whole roadmap of what you're learning and making sure that you're on the right path, which sounds simple. So I decided to take a step back and do some research into CSS. What was it that I actually needed to learn? A big question for me as well, was I want to learn enough CSS to then progress me into HTML. Sorry, it's JavaScript. So the question there therefore becomes, how much CSS do I need to know before moving on to JavaScript? When digging into this and looking on forums and Reddit and stuff, I found this actually really interesting. Opinion polls were quite split on this. So half of them were saying, just learn them in tandem, do them concurrently, that's the best way. The other half were saying, just learn these few basics, then move on to JavaScript. The general consensus was you do not need to be like an expert in CSS to move on to JavaScript. You should actually move on to JavaScript pretty quickly. Popular opinion in these polls though was to get good grips of Flexbox and Grid before you then move on, because this falls into responsive layout, which again is something that I'd gone through tutorial hell, and that's when I went through media queries and stuff. And I'd done a little bit of Flexbox and a tiny bit of Grid in that tutorial, but I felt like I probably could strengthen that area. But this was really good for me because it gave me clarity. I was like, right, okay, let's just focus on Flexbox for a bit, then focus on Grid for a bit. Once I've ticked those two boxes, then let's move on to JavaScript. And then if there's anything that I need to learn more, I can do that sort of on the side. That's where I'm at now. I did do a bit of research around Flexbox as well. So applying the same principles, being like, what in Flexbox do I need to know? And found the sort of basic fundamentals of that. Found a great website called Scrimba, which is like a video tutorial, but has an interactive interface, so you can actually change the code as the video plays. So I completed that last night, and then today there's a great website called Front End Mentor, and I did one of their free challenges, which is applying Flexbox to this style. So because I don't have the premium version, I've literally just got a JPEG image. And they do give you a free style guide to give you like the colors and the fonts and stuff like that. But largely you are just getting the raw HTML, and then you're trying to style it to the same spec as the image. And that has been what I've been working on this morning. It's been super frustrating, but I feel like I'm sort of back on track now, because now I'm not just mindlessly watching a video and just copying it. I'm actually like thinking about the concepts and stuff that I've learned and trying to apply it to to match this JPEG of this website page. The plan is to finish that. I'm about halfway through, then try and apply it to my own fitness website page, then repeat and do the same thing for grid, and then from there start moving on to JavaScript. I'm gonna finish off there. If anyone sees this and they see any clear mistakes that I'm making in terms of how I'm learning or what I'm doing, always open to have feedback and comments. That'd be super helpful. But my goal for next week is to do what I just said for Flexbox and Grid. Hopefully finish that by the end of next week for next week's video, and then have researched, because I honestly don't know anything about JavaScript apart from that it's a programming language. I don't know what it is, how it works. I literally don't know anything. So applying the same lessons learned in CSS, I'm going to take some time to research raw JavaScript, the key fundamentals of that, and suss out a bit of a learning path, and make sure that it also fits with it, because the overall learning path is to learn JavaScript and then a front-end framework and a back-end framework, I think React and Node.js. So also figuring out how much do I need to focus on JavaScript before I then move on to those frameworks. Thanks for watching. I'll be back next week with hopefully some good updates.